Brian Campbell, the big beige one, as he likes to call himself, BC, one of the co-hosts of Morning Kombat, the uber successful MMA podcast, as well as working for Showtime and Showbox. Brian, great to sit down and chat. How are things with you today?
Oh, I'm fired up, man, as always. I'm in Orlando, Florida. Got some business Friday night with Showbox, as you mentioned, but great to be here. That accent is fantastic. Where is that from directly?
So it may have some similarity to the likes of Darren Till and Paddy the Baddy Pimblett, because I'm from Liverpool, the greatest city not only in England but also in the world.
Is there a name for that accent? Doesn't it begin with an S?
We are what's called Scousers. So this is
Scousers. That's it. Yes, yes. And then that's not a derogatory term, right?
No, not at all. No.
Okay. All right.
There is a phrase that sometimes goes around. You may hear Paddy say this, called the Scouse Republic of Liverpool.
Yes.
So if you actually look at the history, we're almost separate to the rest of the country in terms of some of the economic and some of the social factors. So it's a very special place. We'd love to have you one day.
I love it. I can't wait. I got to go visit Wales, go try to find Joe Calzaghe. I mean, there's so much going on in the UK. It's ridiculous, in Ireland as well. So great to hear from you and meet you here. So appreciate
it. Fantastic. Let's talk first and foremost about MK. You guys have been uber successful over the last 2.5 years, and I think it's being capped off by the Best MMA Programming Award that you won last month, as well as the Sports Podcast Awards that you're currently nominated for. So talk to me a little bit about how you feel about the nominations for those awards and kind of what that feels like for you in the project.
It's wild because we don't specifically aim for this. It's a great, sort of achievement. And as we always say on the show, it looks great to our bosses. And it does, it's something for somebody investing money in this, which essentially they're doing, saying, oh, look, it's returning the investment. You can get that critically or you can get that commercially. And we do seek both. But with that said, the fact that winning the World MMA Awards Best Programming came down to a fan vote, that was wildly eye-opening. Not that we, our fan base or our subscriber total is going anywhere close to a Joe Rogan or an Ariel Helwani, but or a UFC produced show as a per se, but just to show that our people are crazier than theirs, and they are they're aggressive and they're willing to go after it. And man, that's humbling. That's humbling because what Luke and I have been given the keys to do, which is it's rare with a major, with major brands like CBS and Showtime aligned with it. It's rare to just get, hey, go for it. And, we have a fear that we're sometimes too edgy or aggressive that it could get us in trouble, but staying so close to that line and being as, real and relatable as we possibly can, just by being ourselves for the most part, outside of, hamming it up here and there. I can't believe it. Everyone feel, there's another award, that we're up for. I mean, in the end, it only means so much, but I think if you focus on the right, reasons for it, you can really use it as a motivator for sure.
Yeah. This was something I wanted to mention because I did a little bit of digging prior to jumping on with you. You started MK, the first episode, in July 2019. So about 7-8 months prior to the pandemic beginning. Obviously, I can remember some of them episodes in the pandemic, the likes of the movie reviews and stuff like that. But looking back, do you think it was quite a difficult time to start a project like this? And do you wonder perhaps where you could have been without the pandemic?
Yeah, absolutely. Because, we were only a few months into Morning Kombat, and right in the beginning, it was one show per week, and it was great. But it was like this fun little project that we did right before the pandemic hit. I remember I was in Las Vegas. I'm trying to remember if it was for Big Time Boxing or if it was for the UFC. Maybe it was the Canelo. I know it now. It was Conor McGregor against Cowboy Cerrone. So it's, a big event, and, get a call from my bosses saying, at CBS saying, should we look into hiring Luke and kind of expanding this and going after it? And it went from 0 to 60 really quick in terms of it being a thing. And then the pandemic hit, and, and it roadblocked a lot of people's life plans, and I'm just like, okay, I remember thinking that was the window closed, but that's okay. We still have this fun show. And it reopened mid-pandemic, and I couldn't believe it. And to hear, this many big names wanting to kind of bring their brands together and join in on it, it's I can't believe it. I can't believe that we went from one show a week to now 3 live ones, plus all the bonus content, the interviews, the post-fight reaction shows. I think we grew a lot. If you're just looking at it from your chops as a broadcaster, the pandemic shut down some certain shows. And I think the fact that we kept the show going, tried to do the best looking and sounding remote show. I mean, we have technological disasters that are about as embarrassing as anything possible. Yet for the most part, we seem to be sort of ahead of the game at keeping it as close to that feel of the studio as we can, even though you really can never replicate that on Zoom. I think we're better for it, because once people see, when we go back to the studio, man, we're ready to bring it. And I think this kind of maybe worked out the chemistry and the chops between Luke and I to really kind of figure out our lane and how we can do this best. And maybe we ride each other a little too hard sometimes. Maybe BC's trying to take it too far into comedy, or bad comedy at that. But I think that we have a formula that you can't. It's hard to compete with. There's shows that maybe believe they're better for other reasons, and that's great. But it's a wild road we took, and we don't get here without people in corporate chairs going, no, go ahead, stay on YouTube and say ridiculous things. As long as you don't get yourself fired, we support you. So I have to love that.
That's something I wanted to mention, is kind of the chemistry between yourself and Luke. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it almost feels at times like there's a to and fro. There's a kind of a seesaw effect, in the sense of Luke trying to do his analysis and his very succinct, detailed game breakdowns, and you kind of leaning into the BC dick jokes, all of that. Did you kind of feel that mid-show, and is that kind of intentional between you and Luke?
I can give you a take as much as it's just natural between us. As much I can say, I think we both know how to step on each other's, like, push the button that we know in real life is going to irritate the other one, and it's too fun and addicting not to go down that road, whether we're sincerely against each other or not. And obviously it's that energy and contradiction between us that gives the show that special feel. But I don't know, sometimes even I'm wondering with myself, because people see our persona on air, then they see these behind the scenes documentaries we do, and it's almost as if off camera, Luke and my own personality switches, and he's the more aggressive, ridiculous one. But with all that said, in the roles we play in different situations, right? Because some clips are designed to be humorous and ridiculous, like Room Service Diaries. Others are legitimately, we're hosting things that are, we're putting on our professional face. I don't ever want Luke and I to get too close. And I wonder sometimes if I'm just like a bad person that, like, looks like we're friends. We are friends. Believe me, we are friends. And we hang out off camera and, on location and stuff. But I'm sometimes a little curmudgeon-y, as he can also be more gregariously. But sometimes behind the scenes, like, nah, man, I don't think we need to hang out this much, because I like that edge between us. I like the idea that, like, we're in this together. But there's never a moment where I'm not looking to attempt to outshine Luke, or in some prickly, brother cases, look to expose him for being a hypocrite or embarrass him or whatever. And, that can become a character and a shtick. It also can go too far. I don't want to piss Luke off, but I do know how to do that. And I think it's fun. I think it's a great vibe that we've got going. And believe me, he can expose me just as easily and aggressively, and he often does.
Yeah. You mentioned there about, and it's kind of something that is, you guys have well documented over the show's history, about the likes of Showtime and CBS giving you a little bit of liberty to push the boundaries a little bit. I guess, was that liberating for you, being on the likes of ESPN for so long, kind of being allowed by your bosses to push them boundaries a little bit?
No question about it. I did the tour at ESPN, and I had a great time. And I have just as much like frustrations and victories as anybody else who navigated corporate walkways and feels like they're self-made and more of like a the year just grinded it out. We all kind of have that upset story in our head of how we got here. But I got the full experience. I mean, it's a corporation. It's owned by Disney. They're as buttoned up and proper in certain areas of the journalistic world than anyone else. Even though ESPN's obviously, been ahead of the game in so many categories, sometimes you can look at them as like too proper and too stale and too safe and too commercialized and all that. And, there were things that I even were part of that, had to get things edited out and couldn't have been done. And to have that freedom where it's not, I mean, we all have like decency, and we know what could likely get us fired, and we try to stay away from that. But to have the freedom to play, and people realize that, we're doing a fun shtick here, and we're having a great time, and we're including our audience, and we're, there's times that I come off set when we do the the in-person shows and look at a producer and go, "Are you gonna get in trouble for that?" They're like, "No, keep. We'll take more." Actually, you know, and you're just like, "Okay, all right." You know, I think that's dialing into what you assume the audience or the most, you know, the heart of your audience would want. And I think it's not raunchiness, because you can do a really bad job trying to recreate like a, you know, a bad morning drive radio show when you do that. But it's just not taking yourself seriously mixed with like, let's just go for it. Let's just, you know, let's just be real. Like, that's the thing, because you know, we all have, when it's like I said, there's times that we're on camera, we got to be buttoned up. I'm calling fights ringside in a suit and tie, you know, but you can still have fun and bring energy to it and bring authenticity. And I think sometimes we think we've got our professional voice when
little bit of a technical difficulty there, which if anyone who's watched Morning Kombat will know that that's part and parcel. I think BC might be cursed a little bit when it comes to tech.
It's sadly on brand, and I hate it. But yeah, let's keep it going. Apologies.
What I wanted to ask next, Brian, and as you can probably remember, we were talking about your early career and progressing into MK. This is a question I've asked a couple of combat sports journalists, and I'm interested to get your thoughts. What was the first moment in combat sports media that you can say on your hands on heart you were truly proud of?
That's a great question. You know, I came right out of high school as like a newspaper writer, reporter, covering like just high school sports, and that, you know, and I stayed in that game for a while, even into my late 20s, before finally getting to ESPN as an editor, as many things. So the idea of getting a byline on ESPN.com, like a legitimate one, was like being published in, you know, in like, you know, like getting your painting in the Louvre, like just ridiculous, you know, for a small town guy who grew up 20 minutes from ESPN, yet felt like it was impossible to break through those walls. And, you know, I finally got in on the worst, crappiest part-time, you know, project job that sucked. And that led to many years that sucked, of working overnights and holidays and weeks. I mean, you know, the grind. But about 5 years in, I reached out to the boxing editors there, developed a good relationship. And then we had a thing where it was before ESPN Mobile and the desktop teams were united. So it was like two separate teams. If you went on your phone, you'd see headlines arranged by one team that was different than if you went on your laptop to look at ESPN.com. Just like, you know, the tech world behind on catching up and realizing that it's all one thing. And I did some boxing writing for the mobile version, which nobody read and saw, just some passion plays, but started to pitch them to ESPN.com as, hey, you know, we got these published stories here for free, you know, like I already work in the company. Can you take a look? And they started going, yeah, you know, hey, pitch us stories all the time. This is great. And, you know, Mickey Ward had just filmed his life story had been portrayed in the movie The Fighter with Mark Wahlberg, of course. And the day that film launched in theaters, Mickey Ward was coming through ESPN. And, you know, I'd been a part as an editor at ESPN of these larger car washes where a celebrity comes in, spends the whole day there, and you know, try to fight with the bookers to get on the list and get time with them. And you know, Mickey Ward's for a boxing guy, he was everything, but to everybody else, he's sort of just some guy. And, you know, I arranged time. I had like an hour with him, and I just sat down and I just started like Chris Farley show, Saturday Night Live, fanboying out, if that reference means anything, just being like, Mickey, remember this fight when you did this? Remember this? And, you know, and kept my recorder going and just had the dream sit down of any fight fan, picking his brain, and then pitched a story to my editors of, here's Mickey's take on his 10 greatest action fights. And, you know, it read like this kind of like, you know, writing like this narrative of him telling the great moments and stuff. And it was great. And it got published. And I remember thinking like, that's it, man. You know, like I made it. I'm like, what was that? I was 32 years old. And I'm like, I made it. You know, like that's it. I could be an editor the rest of my life, or whatever job. I can sell insurance if I get laid off. I did it. I did something in this career. And, you know, it's not to say I didn't have, well, it is to say, so here's what I want to say. It's not that I didn't have the work ethic to want more. but I didn't have goals. I didn't think this stuff was possible. You know what I mean? So to me, that was really it, man. I had hit it. I wouldn't have believed it per se if you said just a couple years later, you're going to be a full-time writer. You're going to be doing TV work. You're going to be at every major fight. You're going to be living out your dream. No, I wouldn't have thought that was possible. I remember thinking if I could get sent to one big fight in Vegas and just get a taste of it as like a backup editor and just get to feel it, I will have scratched that itch. No, well, look what happened, the years that followed. So I've had so many great moments that I'm blessed for, but you remember what that first, byline being published felt like that was printed out, put it up on the fridge, that was call everyone. And, that same year I wrote a column on Mike Tyson going into the Boxing Hall of Fame that got published. And like a month later, he tweets it out. And he's like, I get emails from his manager who are like, he wants to meet you. He wants to call. So, he calls me and leaves this long, crazy voicemail about how, that story I wrote touched him. And I was just like, what? Mike Tyson? What? Like, are you kidding me? So, I'm still the fan, I'm still that guy. And I don't ever want to stop being that guy because, this fight game is ridiculous and it's dangerous and scary and entertaining and addicting, but I have a pure love for it, and I just at the very least hope to bring that to every project I'm a part of.
Yeah, we're obviously in completely different positions. You've obviously got much more experience and years on me, but I will catch you up one day, hopefully. But
I like that spirit. Yes.
I often use the analogy to some of my friends, saying it's a bit like taking the pill in the Matrix, in the sense of like when my friends see me out and about interviewing fighters, they can't imagine having a small relationship, but a relationship nonetheless. They see them on the TV, and that's the example that I use, is almost peeling back the curtain a little bit. Obviously, Mike Tyson and Mickey Ward is a little bit different, but of course, it still applies, I suppose.
Well, I remember, it's so funny. I have it still. It's now taped on the wall of my closet, where I was an editor at ESPN by like 2013. I was writing stories, but I'm just Dan Rayfield's editor on the boxing page. And suddenly Showtime runs a graphic of this coming next fight that's going to be on, next week, Lucas Matisse. And it's a full screen quote that says the most dangerous junior welterweight in the world, Brian Campbell, ESPN. And it's from some random story that I wrote and had published. But in that moment, I remember thinking like, I made it. Somebody put my name on TV, my name, and said that this like is an expert take. And like, I'll never forget what that feeling meant like, felt like. And I remember I took a screenshot of it and had it printed out and taped it up on my wall. That like, I mean, it's wild. It's wild, man. I get what you're saying. Like it becomes normal after a while, but you can stop and pinch yourself regularly and be like, they send me to these things. They give me preferred seating at these things. Like, what life is this? The best one ever. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. Out of interest, would you like to very quickly hear what my answer would be for that question?
Oh, heck yeah.
Yeah. So I started this project as just a pet project in COVID, November 2020. When I don't know if you know, I don't know the state of the US at the time, but in England it was a full lockdown, not leaving your house, nothing like that. So I started it, and within 6 weeks, I got an interview with Calvin Kattar prior to his Max Holloway fight. And it was a little bit of a surreal moment because within a month and a half, I'd got a main event, and I'd had Rob Font and his coach Tyson. And I think it was my 18th interview.
That's awesome.
And he comes on in a white robe and a New England cartel cap, and we done 20 minutes, and he was laughing and joking. And it was brilliant, and the fight never went his way, but I've had him on a couple of times since. We've been able to do a podcast, him, Rob, Calvin, Tyson, and their Muay Thai coach, Jake.
That's great.
We've established a little bit of a relationship, hoping to go over next year. But that moment of getting a UFC main event, if you remember, there was the first main event on ABC, so it was a big deal. The Holloway
Holloway fight. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I love to hear the passion like that, and hard work pays off, but going for it pays off too, and having balls and taking that step in the direction of what you really want to do in life. It's so hard to do because we all feel like there's like, we got to know what we're doing ahead of time, but like nobody knows what they're doing at the time. You know what I mean? Just go for it. And once you get past that barrier, there's going to be a lot more barriers. But once you get past that barrier, you'll start to. It thins out the group pretty quickly.
Yeah, of course. I want to talk very quickly because primarily on my channel I focus on interviews, and I want to talk a little bit about your interview technique. Primarily, I watched the top 10 interviews a couple of weeks ago. Your top 10 best people to interview in MMA, and some of the way you characterize an interview I thought was very interesting. You talked about it as an extraction of information, about trying to make someone say something they don't want to say, but in the nicest way possible, not in a rude or malicious way. Talk to me a little bit about how you've developed your interviewing style and some of the techniques that you feel as though you employ.
You know, what forced me to try to be a great interviewer, where in the past I didn't think of it as that. I didn't think about, let me try to be the best or so let me try to add something unique that no one's doing. No, it was just sort of like, I can't believe I get to do this. Let me look like I belong. And I even spent a lot of time in this business climbing pretty high levels with that wrong mindset of, let me just not get exposed as the fraud that I probably really am. Let me, so I had a lot of vanilla, crappy interviews thinking, I'm just doing what everybody else would do in this spot. And I just want to look like everybody else. And you start to realize that even though covering combat sports is the best, because like you getting that Cater interview out of nowhere, like you get access that you can't get in other sports. You just can't get it, the way that it's set up. And on top of that, you get these guys that are just humble, hardworking, Joes who just happen to be great world-class fighters. So you get a lot of character and access. It's great. But, it's easy to do the same stuff. And when a fighter is going through a planned rotation of interviews like the UFC regularly does, and it's an efficient way of doing it, it's going to be the same interview every single time. And you start to think, okay, how am I going to be different so that people want to see my interviews? But also, how is my content that I'm creating going to be different? And I started to realize that, look, what are the best interviews? When you lower someone's guard, and there's so many ways to do that. And your angle can be nefarious, or it can be completely, humble, and honest and wholesome, But you've got to lower their guard to get them off of the set responses that they have built up because they've done so many others, or they're regularly interviewed, right? They're pro athletes that, you have to get them so far away from that. And sometimes you have to take chances to disarm them. And sometimes you'll fail miserably. And some people are just going to be closed and they can't be disarmed. Yeah. But once you get them disarmed, now you're dealing with the real person. And it's not that you're setting them up to fail, to say something they don't want to say. It's just something they never expected to say. And typically the best moments of that are when you get a hint behind the curtain into the real person who has the same fears that we all have, and the same, human responses to things, and who's not a superhero, even though they portray one in the cage or in the boxing ring. They take on a stupid amount of risk for our entertainment, but you get a look at the little man behind the curtain, and that's the genuine stuff. So I think, it's our job, if we're going to be a high level interviewer, to have our own shtick to a degree, to bring something to the table that makes people feel happy or warm or comfortable, or, I can listen, Ariel Helwani's where he's at for a reason, because he's got a cadence and he's got a control over the interview. That's admirable. Yeah. I'm a little different in my style, of course, but my goal is to get them off script. And look, sometimes I got to play the wacky guy to do that. Sometimes I've got to be very critical and open and honest. And sometimes you got to come hard at them to try to say, okay, because, especially the guys who aren't good talkers. How many times I've failed with Cowboy Cerrone? How many times I've got nothing, not even a usable soundbite? I started to have to go, you know what? I got to get smarter, because I got to be more well-researched. But I got to outthink him. And I got to, I'm going to come at him. I'm going to drop gloves and come at him and see what happens. And sometimes you can, however you get there, you got to get there. Or guess what? There's no reason for people to tune in, even if they like you, to watch your interview with that person. So, that's sort of how I got to that point of like, I've got to never let the interview or interviewee know my true intentions. Like I have to risk that they might think I'm a sleazeball, or that they might think I'm just some goofball, but I got to commit to those characters in that moment to get something real in return. And look, you can use that for all the wrong reasons, and some people do, and that, you know what I mean? And you get, you know, but I think if you're pure and wholesome in your intentions at the end of the day, beyond let me get something I can use for a headline, but not let me entrap this person, then that's the art right there, walking that line.
For me, when I try and prep, I will at least try and set some time aside to watch some of the previous fights. So, for example, if we're talking about a rematch, then it makes obvious sense to watch the first fight. I'll also try and watch other interviews and try and see what kinds of responses people get from certain questions. What is your preparation like? I saw you put out a lot of interviews this week, the likes of Anthony Pettis, Derek Lewis. What is your kind of standard preparation like for a high level interview?
Yeah, it's changed over the years. And I say that because, you know, I was overly prepared when I was doing vanilla interviews at the end of the day. And it's sometimes, you know, we get a little too big on our own britches. Like, okay, well, I got to show them that I know my stuff. So we ask these long meandering questions filled with stats and just to prove to. Now, look, I think there's an angle sometimes where you have to do that to get somebody to trust you that you know what you're talking about. So that's one thing. But it changed when I started to go, you know what, I don't want to have interviews anymore. I want to have conversations. And it's not that that's a unique and novel approach. That's the basis of great podcasting, right? You want to have long form conversations that don't feel like a stuffy Q&A interview. It feels like two dudes hanging out. So that was a major change where for a while it was like, I'm going to do any research outside of the standard, you know, stuff of knowing what I'm talking about, because I want everything here to be as organic as it could possibly be. But that doesn't always work. And obviously you have to have a different strategy based on the time limit. Because if you're in some kind of car wash and you're getting 10, 15 minutes, you got to get there quick. There meaning something from them. So there's all different ways to think about it. But the right mix for me is enough research, but let me never lean on it. Because if I'm doing my job, I'm listening and I'm picking up not only on something they said that can become an exit off the highway, but I want to try to armchair in the moment, be the psychologist and try to pick up. Did I see a little vulnerability there? Did I see a little anger there? Or maybe they bit their tongue a little bit and you know they had something more. That produces the best content, and none of that can be researched. I mean, there's some things you can do, but for the most part, it's like, don't forget that you have a role in this act. And I don't mean that in like theater and entertainment, yet I kind of do, because you got to keep people there. But you got a role. You got to, you have a role in this two-person dance to make it, to create anything worth having. So you've got to be the less staged and I mean, how many times at the UFC press conference see people reading the questions they've written out? They're fun. I'm not saying like everyone has to have the perfect memory. But, I don't ever stand up to a microphone knowing 100% what I'm about to say, and I think that's what keeps things, fresh when you feel comfortable getting to that level.
I've even noticed sometimes in some of the interviews that I've done, I'll have someone who's really, really passionate on a subject, and me having my checklist next to me, I'll change subject, and immediately the kind of interest will go down. And sometimes I think what you're saying there is about being in the moment and kind of recognizing when you've got someone talking, because the end of the day, you mentioned there a difficult interview. If you've got that guy talking, I presume you keep him talking as long as you can, as much as you can. So that is a mistake that can sometimes be made. Veering off topic, trying to get him to talk about fighter pay or his UFC release, and it going downhill.
Yeah, I mean, it's a dance, man, and there's an art to it, and it's like even in what works on one person doesn't work on another, because how do you ask a critical question? Well, sometimes the best way is to build up trust first that you're for them. So I mean, there's all psychologists play here, kiss their ass a little in the beginning to make the hard question either not that hard of a blow, or to disguise it, because look, if you ask it in a telegraphed way, they're going to shut you down. Disguising it sometimes is the only way to get a legitimate response. But dude, it's a tightrope walk, as you know already, doing it. And some people can sniff it out right away and think it's disingenuous and shut down on you. And it makes, by the way, and I'm sure you've probably experienced this, I'm not recreating the wheel, the times you've either lost them or that it was a long road to get them to finally buy in on the interview. Those are the greatest catches. Like, I don't have the patience. I don't know what people are in it for when they fish. Fishing's a thing, right? I get nature and solitude, but I can't have the patience to, go out there at 4 a.m. and spend, however long.
Yeah.
But I got the patience to waste, 10 minutes of a 15-minute interview just to get that 5 minutes of gold. And when you catch that fish, man, that's why we do this, right?
Yeah, 100%. Well, you mentioned there being in the moment and being like two guys talking. I think that's how I'd like to end this a little bit. What I want to kind of ask a little bit about is the upcoming London card, March 19th, Volkov versus Aspinall. What I've got a question for you, Brian. So currently there are 6 Brits in the UFC rankings: Darren Till, Leon Edwards, Arnold Allen, Tom Aspinall, Paul Craig, and Joanne Calderwood. And there's a whole host of other Brits up and down the roster, probably top 20, top 25. If I give you a free £100,000 bet, 100,000 pound bet, we'll say, because it's more, and I said, Brian, put a bet on who would become the second British UFC champion, who is your money on?
God, no. Who is the top of that list again, along with Aspinall and Till?
Aspinall, Till, Edwards, Arnold Allen, Paul Craig, and Joanne Calderwood.
All right. Edwards, I think, has the best chance there, right? Okay. That's the educated take. Yes. In terms of that. Do you have a great chance? No. Look, the guy at top of him is a generational talent who's already defeated him. But that's probably the best chance, because I love Tom Aspinall's future, and I love that he brings nuance to young slugger. Like, there's something smart going on behind the scenes in how he approaches this game. But even though it's the heavyweight division and there's more of a puncher's chance, I'm like, do I think he's a future title, a future champion? No, I haven't yet envisioned that. I haven't yet seen enough evidence. Where at least with Leon Edwards, you're like, say what you will about whatever negative things. The guy's legit in the cage, and he's right there, and he might, who for all we know, exit the cage with that belt. So, is this considered a hot time? Like, I like Paul Craig a lot. He's proving himself to have a brighter ceiling than maybe some of us thought. But is this considered a downtime in the history of British or UK MMA?
I would say the exact opposite, to be honest.
They're thriving in terms of depth.
Have a little look at the Volkov Aspinall cards. I don't know if many of them will be household names, but if you just look at some of the quality, especially on the undercard, the likes of Jack Shaw, 15-0, Nathaniel the Prospect Woods, who was, I think, when he fought Casey Kenny, after Casey Kenny beat him, he got top 15 ranking. Mohamed Mokhayev coming in at 5-0. There is honestly a lot of talent. And then the week after, we've got undefeated Lerone Murphy fighting out in Columbus, Ohio, against Nate Landwehr. And Lerone Murphy is the real deal, Holyfield.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Nate Landwehr is must-see train wreck TV at times. So this will be a fun fight to see.
I presume Nate Landwehr is your type of guy, and Lerone Murphy is my type of guy, given
I would think
country.
So.
Yeah,
Nate Landwehr can make me cringe, but at the same time, I'm like, I grew up with guys like that. I can hang with Nate Landwehr. I guess I know how he's wired at the end of the day. He's a wild man, though. He comes to finish, so it should be fun. But no, I guess you're right. I guess depth-wise, in terms of young guys who haven't fully been tested yet, this is a fun time for the UK MMA scene. I know boxing's always thriving of late. Like, really, right? Ever since that 2012 Olympics, it's like UK boxing is on freaking fire. Are you into that side at all?
Yeah, I'm into boxing, Muay Thai, everything. Especially the city that I'm from. So obviously Liverpool is known for a lot of people, but most notably the Smith brothers. Liam Smith is on the upcoming.
You could be a Smith brother, dude. You look like the extra guy who didn't box out of the group. Like, oh, he's a school teacher, but we like him though, just the same.
I'm the Smith cousin, if you like.
Yes, there it is.
I've actually had the pleasure of interviewing 2 of the 4, Callum and Stephen.
Great guys.
And they're all very different as well. Stephen's quite loud and quite animated. Callum's quite reserved, and you've, as we mentioned earlier, kind of got to poke and prod and get some stuff out of him.
Yes.
But
I like Liam. Liam's got the gray hair. He's a good interview too. I like him.
Yeah, Liam's. I don't know if you follow kind of British boxing, but Liam's coming off quite a big domestic win. Against Anthony Fowler, the Battle of Liverpool. So he's fighting Jesse Vargas on the Taylor Serrano card, which is a big fight.
That's a good fight. Yeah, absolutely. I'd be looking forward to that one for sure. All right, yeah. So that's I could see the Smith brother resemblance. Anybody like the who was the nicest guy? Who was the guy that Canelo dropped with the body shot
Rocky
for that
Fielding.
160? Rocky Field. What a nice. I met him multiple times, interviewed him a bunch ahead of that Canelo fight. It's like, man, what a good dude. He shouldn't be in this game. Like, he's a talented fighter, but like, he's such a nice guy that I'm, you wonder how these guys can do this for a living. But shout out to him just the same.
So Rocky currently lives in Dubai. I think he's got a fight. I think he's on the Echo Arena card. The Paul Butler, John Real Casemiro card, the 20th of April. He's on that card. But Rocky, here's a little fact for you. So in Liverpool, Rocky has a nickname called Rocky from Stocky. So he is from a place called Stockbridge Village, which, if I presume you don't know, is a really quite deprived and quite a rough part of Liverpool. But Rocky from Stocky just sounds fantastic.
That's great. I mean, that should be his name, man. That should be the fighting nickname that he's got. I love that. Yeah,
of course. I've got one final question for you. I know you're a busy man. Within the beginning of 2022 now, what are your goals in your career for the next 12 months? It's
a great question. So, I've never hid what my goal is in this game, whether it be to Luke or the fans or anything. Like, I'm going to call fights for a living. That's the, do I also want to have a great show like Morning Kombat alongside it? Absolutely. So my goals in 2022 are, expand Morning Kombat to the next level. And maybe that means, cleaning up some of our, being in the studio more, cleaning up the odds and ends there, becoming a more well-oiled machine. I think talent-wise, we haven't even hit what's possible, and it's going to take being more committed to the studio. It's interesting to get subscriber numbers; they go in waves, and I like winning awards, and that sounds great too. But growing that show and evolving in the segments and everything, we got to be fresh. We got to be ahead of it and constantly moving and reshaping. And I like the team that we're putting together to do that. So that's exciting. But calling fights is the drug, man. Every job's got good and bad moments to it. This is a great moment, getting to call fights. So I'm in show number 2 coming up with Showbox, since joining that family and that team. I've called fights for a bunch of different networks here and there on like cup of coffee situations or short contract situations. But, I did interviews like this a year ago, and people said, well, what's your goal for the next year? And I'm like, I'm going to be calling fights. I don't know how I'm going to get there. I don't know what the path is exactly, but I know I'm going to keep doing that. And thanks to God, that's happening. So that is my goal, man. Get better and figure out my exact voice on the air and swing big, big, because that's, it's, man, like if you said, what's the percentage in each category that's ideal of talent with hard work, with, not being an asshole, with all that, you don't realize in the beginning, unless you're wired that way, but have some balls, like go, like, that's why I say it, dare to be great, man. Like just, you can't, there's no substitute for the reps needed to get better, and we all need to keep getting better. And that's, and sometimes you're just going to be in a long season of just banking reps, and that's what you need, and you don't realize that. But when that door opens, no matter where you are, when it opens, you gotta stand up and come out swinging. And I hope, again, that's the spirit we bring to Morning Kombat, and I hope that for everybody else and their walk of life, to just, no regrets, man.
Yeah. Fantastic way to end, Brian. I really appreciate your time, and it's been a very much insightful conversation. I feel like we've covered a lot, and it's a true honor to get you on, and I'm happy for all the success of Morning Kombat and your own career.
Thank you, sir. And I'm sorry about my many technical errors here, but on brand as always. And stay at it, man. You're coming on. If you're coming on, come on. So that's what I gotta say. Bring it.